Hey guys, welcome to this, I'm going to call it a Toyota fanboy episode of Talking Cars, because we're going to be talking about two things, actually three things, Tom. We're going to be talking about off-roading, we're going to be talking about the 4Runner, and more importantly, we're going to be talking about the FJ Cruiser.
We just bought an FJ Cruiser. It's a 2014 and it was very expensive.
And an FJ Cruiser is one of those iconic cars that feels like it should have been made by some other company and not Toyota, if you know what I mean.
What do you mean by that?
It's just so wacky for a company like Toyota that's so buttoned down to come up with something that's so heavily style-driven.
Yeah, and in this podcast we'll talk about all the really cool things that make the FJ Cruiser so special, and we'll talk about why we bought the FJ Cruiser, why maybe you out there should buy the FJ Cruiser, and perhaps why you should probably buy a 4Runner.
All right, and that is coming up right after the intro. Sit back and relax, or keep driving if you're driving. TFL Talking Cars is on the air, the world's most popular car podcast. Okay, maybe not yet, but we're working on it. All right, we're back. So, Tommy, we normally buy either classic, cool old cars or cool new cars, but the FJ is kind of neither one of those, right? Because, well, it was built from 2007, at least sold from 2007 to 2014 here in the United States. It's actually still sold in many places around the world. So places like South America. No, actually, sorry, South Africa.
Yeah, and the Middle East. You can go out and buy a brand new FJ Cruiser. But, like you mentioned, in the U.S., it was only around for 7 model years. And it was an interesting 7 model years because when it debuted, 2006, 2007, right? Around that era, we were heading into the financial crisis. Yeah,
and like I said, it's an odd bird for Toyota because it's so heavily driven by its style, right? I mean, in some of the other podcasts we've done, we've said that there are no such thing as boring cars with clamshell doors, right? Think about the ones that have clamshell doors, the Honda Element, the BMW i3, and
Mazda RX-8,
and of course now the FJ Cruiser. And it's true, right? The vehicle was specifically designed to be a dedicated off-roader with all of that design going into that function. So, Toyota is the world's largest automaker. They usually build cars for the mass audience, and this car was designed for the enthusiast.
So I have kind of a different perspective. I think a lot of the FJ Cruiser design is not for its off-road capability because there's a lot of really silly design elements that probably hamper it off-road.
Like 3 wipers?
No, like the fact that you can't see out the back or really out the front or out the side.
It was actually designed in California by Calty.
Yeah, so the concept came out in 2003. And it's styled after the original FJ, the FJ40, which, grew in popularity in the United States throughout the 1960s and 70s. It was a competitor to the CJ, the Jeep, and that's where a lot of the design comes from. So in the front, you've got the round lights with the Toyota grille. You've got the white roof, which is straight out of the FJ40. A lot of similarities, but this is kind of more of a throwback vehicle. So the FJ40 was definitely, all about function, all about durability and simplicity, where the FJ Cruiser had a lot of more elements in it that were cool, but didn't necessarily help it in terms of longevity or off-road capability.
Yeah, let's talk about it kind of first in mechanical terms and then in sales numbers so that we kind of set a baseline. So it does share the basic chassis and running drivetrain from the Toyota 4Runner.
Yeah, so it's based on the old Toyota 4Runner. Slightly shorter, though. So It's got a shorter wheelbase in the 4Runner, but the 4-liter V6 is the same. The transmissions were pretty much the same.
5-speed automatic.
Yeah,
or manual.
Frame design was pretty much the same.
And that was, I think, based actually on the Prado in some ways. Right, so it goes back to like the European vehicle, if I recall right. And like I said, it was sold from 2007 to 2014, and they sold about 220,000 of them over that 7-year stretch, with most of them being sold in 2007 and 2008. And I think about 120,000 of those were sold in those 2 years. And then the following years, they sold between 13 and 14,000 every year. And the reason, of course, is whenever a new car is introduced, there's the most excitement around it, the most interest. And so the first year of production or the second year is always when you sell the most of them. So if you're out there looking for one in the used market, those will be the ones you'll run into the most. And then they did do some changes in 2009. For the 2010 model of the year, they made the diff a little bit more aggressive, a little bit bigger, a little bit stronger. But for the most part, it remained fairly unchanged for those 7 years that it was sold.
They did improve like the infotainment system a little bit.
Yeah, the radio got a little bit better.
And then I think the big thing they changed is 07 and 08 seemed to have a lot of rust issues. So the frame of those 2 years especially, if you look under them, especially in the used market, if they've come out of a salty location, they tend to be a little bit more crusty, we'll say, than the later ones. And this was an issue not only to the FJ Cruiser, but you remember like Tacoma had that huge frame recall?
Yeah, we had a friend who actually had a Tacoma where they changed out the entire frame under warranty, and that is a big job.
That is a big job for sure.
That's a big job, yeah. One of the cool things, I guess, about the FJ is it's probably outside of the Wrangler the least depreciating car. We bought a 2014 with 57,000 miles on it, and it cost us $33,500, which is almost as much as it costs new, actually.
Which is just shocking.
Yeah, which is just shocking. And I think the reason for that is, well, because Toyota has this reputation for reliability, and the car has become, dare I say it, Tommy, a modern collectible.
It certainly has a cult following. So there's people that like the FJ, and there's people that love the FJ, and there's a lot of people that can only drive FJs, it seems like. So there's a lot of, just hardcore fans, similar to the Jeep world, except in the Jeep world you have 30-some years of Wrangler, right? In the FJ world, you had 7 years of FJ. So that really limits, realistically, the number of modern era FJ Cruisers that you can buy. I mean, it's great. The idea is great of buying an old FJ40, but the reality is they're really small and cramped, and I just didn't fit in one when I drove it, and they don't really have air conditioning for the most part unless you retrofit them, and they're pretty slow. So the FJ Cruiser had a lot of the cool design elements of the original, but brought it into the modern era. Now, the 03 concept is pretty much exactly what went into production in 07. There were some cool design elements they left out. So, for example, the transmission shifter on the concept was like a shovel.
Yeah.
It had this cool shovel handle design.
Yeah.
They had these interior lights that you could remove and use as flashlights. Some of those components didn't make it into the final version, but there were some weird things that did. Stuff like the body-colored interior panels. So you've got these like panels on the dashboard and across the doors that match the outside. You've got those weird little marker lights in the mirrors. Those made it into production that you just won't typically see in other Toyotas.
Yeah, and the color that it came out in was voodoo blue. It's a very bright blue.
Which I didn't know. So voodoo blue is like, in my mind, the TRD Pro color from like the Tacoma and 4Runners, right? But it turns out that was actually an FJ color too, 13 years ago.
Yeah, it's cool. Yeah, it's a really bright color. And, what makes that car so cool is it's like I said, it's designed and purpose-built to be an off-roader. So you've got these two little, I'm going to call them jaunty fenders that jut out in front of the wheels, right? And those can be replaced if they get hit. You've got the inclinometer on the inside. You've got this little binnacle with, three cool, there's a compass, there's a thermometer and clock for outside temperature, and then there's an inclinometer, right? Then, of course, you've got the clamshell doors, which are, really unique. And then you have all the things that you need to go off-road, right? You have a really good approach angle, departure angle, breakover angle, because the wheelbase is relatively short. And you can get, depending on, what model you purchase, you can get A-Track. In later years, you could get the A-Track with the little knob where you could control the speed, and that's basically an off-road crawl control system. And best of all, you can get a locking rear diff. So you have a center locker and a rear locker, A-Track. It makes it pretty unstoppable off-road. But beware. When we were looking for one, I was looking for one in LA because, you don't want a car that comes out of someplace that is not salty, like you said. And I found a whole bunch of FJs that were really cheap. You know why?
Yeah, they're two-wheel drive.
Yeah, they're two-wheel drive.
I would argue, though...
You could have gotten into it.
I would make the argument that the FJ Cruiser is no more purpose-built off-road than a 4Runner.
Okay.
Because if you can buy a
How about purpose-designed off-road?
No, I think it was just a much cooler-looking 4Runner. It's like if you wanted a 4Runner, you wanted to go off-road, but you also wanted a lot more design. Because the fact that they made a two-wheel drive version tells me that they weren't all intended to go just drive off-road.
That's the California and Texas
But
people.
they sold them here. I mean, you could buy just like on the 4Runner, you can buy a two-wheel drive 4Runner.
I'm betting a lot of dealers didn't order two-wheel drive FJs.
But my point is, though, it's a really cool vehicle, but for a lot of people, it's pretty heavily compromised. So, like the clamshell doors.
Yeah, if you're buying it as a family car, you're going to hate the backseat.
Yeah, the clamshell doors aren't great, and the backseat is really small.
And the visibility is, because of that, it's almost got the Hummer-like short short roof line, right, height, and so you kind of don't see out of it very well.
No, it's very hard to see, especially rocks coming up. So I think there's a lot of deterrence to its design, but I mean I don't think it's any less off-road worthy than a 4Runner.
And we did take it off-road for the first time seriously yesterday, and we'll get to that. So we'll talk about how it does off-road.
Now let's talk about the 4Runner, right? You can still buy the 4Runner.
Yeah, much more practical. That's a much more Toyota-ish car.
Now we're up, I think, to the 5th gen 4Runner.
And it's still basically the same powertrain.
Yep, 4-liter V6. Only the 5-speed automatic in the U.S.
Yeah, the FJ was available in a manual.
The 6-speed manual. But the 4Runner is very similar. Solid rear axle, independent front suspension, body on frame. It had skid plates underneath, 8-track, crawl control. Are available on the 4Runner. So very similar in terms of off-road capabilities. A little bit longer, which means the breakover isn't as good.
So it's like they're siblings, but the FJ is kind of the more artsy, more...
Yes, I think that's a great way of looking at it.
More kind of out there version of the same vehicle.
And we met with a lovely guy named James.
James Buff, yeah. He runs the Facebook FJ page. Yeah,
in Colorado. He's a real expert on these things. And he told us the progression typically goes, you buy an FJ Cruiser, and then you always end up in a 4Runner. So you have the FJ Cruiser, you have fun, you wheel it off-road, you build it up, and then it turns out you get the wife and the kids, and then you need room, and then you end up with the 4Runner. So that seems to be the progression for FJ people.
Now let's talk about kind of the options that were available. So ours, when we bought it in 2014, there were 3 packages. And basically, we didn't get the off-road package, but it had a lot of the off-road goodies, right? So it had the locking rear diff, it had the 8-track.
Yep.
It didn't have the, I guess it was like a locking diff that would work with the transmission to lock and unlock as it electronically controlled, right? Ours just locks and stays locked. So once it's locked, it stays locked.
I haven't heard about that.
Yeah, I was looking at the options list for 2014.
There was also rock rails were an option,
which we don't have.
So rock rails are an option. JBL sound was an option.
We have the big subwoofer in the back.
Yep.
And then, of course, we didn't get the roof rack, but we went and bought one.
Right, you really wanted the roof rack.
Yeah, I just think it's part of the whole thing.
So
it feels naked without it.
The kind of the pinnacle of them was the Trails Team Edition.
Yeah, if you're in the off-road Toyota world, you'll know it because it's basically the TRD version of the 4Runner, the Trail Team's version of the FJ. It's just a different branding.
Yes.
You could get TRD exhaust on the FJ.
Yeah, the TRD exhaust. Trails Team was more or less like a color and sticker package.
It was an appearance package. Every year they picked one color that they featured. Like ours is cement, and then they would color toward the end. They would color match not just the little molding, right, but also the seats.
Yeah, the seats were color matched. I think they, it's depending on the year, but I'm pretty sure almost all, if not all of them, had paint matched roofs.
Yeah.
So like ours has a white roof, but I think the Trails Team had the body colored roofs.
Which is weird because the paint matched, according to James, roof is actually much easier to make than when you have to basically spray paint the roof white and you have to put 2 colors in the body.
I don't think they're spray painting it. I don't see like a guy out there like with a rattle can.
No. I mean, it goes it's robotically spray painted.
Right.
There's machines.
They paint it up. Yeah. I think the Trails Team also had special wheels. I think it had different wheels over ours.
But it didn't have any more off-road capability.
But in 2014, they only made somewhere around 2,500 of them. And people really, really love them.
There's this final edition in 2014, and there's also even a more final edition that came out in 2017 in Japan. That's also crazy. But the one here in the U.S. is the most valuable. Those are running like $45,000 right now.
Yeah, which is crazy because I think new they were probably 40 or 42,000.
Like a 2007 FJ, and we pay like a $2,000 premium here in Colorado for them. So if you're someplace else, or if you're in Colorado and you want one, look someplace else and then bring it back here. But, a high mileage one, and I consider anything over 200K to be high mileage. 2007, 2008, those are like anywhere from like, let's say on the low end, maybe 10,000 to on the high end, 15.
Okay.
And then of course, the later the model, the less miles, the more expensive it gets. And if you get the Trails Team, just add another premium, like $5,000 on top of that.
Right, which is just absurd to me. But that's what people want. I mean, people love the last ones, and especially 2010 and newer are the ones that are the most desirable. So people pay typically well over $20,000-$25,000.
Now, just like Jeeps, there's a lot of available mods for them. So the one difference between, of course, an FJ and a Wrangler is that the FJ has independent front suspension, whereas a Wrangler has a solid axle. Solid axle in the back of both vehicles, and so they're a little bit harder to lift.
It makes it a little bit more tricky, but it's still super doable.
But obviously the first thing people did with them was lift them.
Yeah, you see lift kits, bumpers were big, so you see a lot of winch bumpers on them. Roof racks up top, very popular. You can, armor the underside of them. Various rock rails are options. Pretty much anything you'd expect on an off-roader you can do to an FJ Cruiser.
Yeah, and they're not quite as... I like to say the Wrangler is kind of the Harley of the automotive world. You can really make it your own, right? There's such a huge aftermarket for it. Huge! Seriously, it's big. Aftermarket for it. But with the FJ, it's a little bit smaller, so you don't quite have the choice of front bumpers, rear bumpers, right? When I see them modded, they all kind of always look the same to me, whereas when I see a Jeep that's modded, it looks very different.
The interesting thing about the FJ...
You don't agree, though? Is that like, I don't agree look?
Well, I just think there's a really big off-road community around them. I think if you start diving into it, there are tons of options for parts.
But they like I said, when I see a modded FJ, it looks very similar to all the other modded FJs. Right? Wranglers, when you see them, they're crazy different. Because you can go really crazy with a Wrangler, right? People not only just mod them, but people will cut them and put 44s on them. This is not something that's happening with an FJ.
I mean, yeah, there's certainly less.
Right, they cut them, they stretch them, or they get the stretch version, right? I mean, there's just they tear the whole body off of them, so you have like naked Wranglers. I mean, there's just this whole world of different Wranglers.
The FJ Cruiser, though, if you want to go into the off-road community, there's a lot that you can do to them. I don't want to make it sound like they're all looking.
Yeah, I mean, we've gone to the FJ Summit now, both of us, and when you go there, there's certainly a variety of different ones.
Yeah, huge numbers of just stuff that you can do to them. Now, the FJ Cruiser, let's talk about the 4Runner.
Sure.
Because...
that's got more mods.
The 4Runner, I think, might have more mods because they build more of them. They built 220-some thousand, like you said, FJ Cruisers, which sounds like a lot, and it is a lot.
But nothing compared to the 4Runner.
Yeah, nothing compared to the 4Runner or the Wrangler.
Yeah.
And interestingly enough, if you're looking at like a 2014 FJ Cruiser, price-wise, you could get into a 4Runner SR5, brand new. With the warranty. Yeah. So which one would you rather have? Would you do the 4Runner or the FJ?
Well, it depends, I mean, the 4Runner, your neighbor's going to have. The FJ, not so much.
Why? Which one would you do, I'm asking?
FJ.
FJ?
Yeah. I love the 4Runner. So Toyota, of course, used to have that 4-liter in everything, including the Tacoma, and then they went and they put the 3.5-liter V6 into the Tacoma. And I got to tell you, I'm just not a huge fan of that engine. It's not very much more fuel efficient, right? That was a rationale. And by the way, the reason they discontinued the FJ, well, officially the reason it may have been because they were only selling 13 to 14,000 a year, but was because of CAFE standards, right? It's not a very fuel efficient vehicle. And so to get away from that, they put a 3.5 liter into the Tacoma, which isn't much more fuel efficient, and certainly isn't as smooth or as, at least in my book, as coveted as that 4 liter. So,
but you can still get the 4 liter in the 4Runner.
Yes.
So
with that 5-speed manual, which is crazy because now
automatic.
Our Silverado has a 10-speed, which is absolutely crazy.
So you would get the used FJ Cruiser over the new 4Runner?
We did, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I love the 4Runner. Don't get me wrong. When I did a couple of years ago, I had the pleasure to go from Moab all the way to Telluride. Basically, not for the FJ Summit, but I was there for the FJ Summit, and we did off-road, and we got to drive all the off-roady Toyotas, and that includes the Tundra, the Tacoma, the Land Cruiser, the 4Runner, and the, I forget one? Or the Tacoma. Did I say that already? Not the FJ, wasn't around.
I don't think they had the Land Cruiser, did they?
Yeah, they had the Land Cruiser.
Did they? Wow.
Yeah, it was, well, they had the Land Cruiser because it was with Overland.
But that was Kurt built out.
Right, yeah,
200
But it was there.
Yeah, you weren't driving it.
No.
Yeah.
But I've driven it.
Right.
I know what it's like. We actually owned one.
Yes.
So anyway, out of all those, my favorite by far was the 4Runner. It just felt the most.
But you would still get the FJ over.
Yeah, because it's cool. That's why it's such an. That's why it's
cool,
such a premium.
But you're missing a lot of like the.
You're missing, the back seat
and the trunk
and the
rear window that goes down.
Yeah.
And the little bit of the towing capacity.
And a new vehicle.
With a warranty.
Yeah, I think it tows what? The FJ tows 4,700?
I think 400's like 5. It's a little bit.
It's a little bit more, yeah, but it's not much more.
I mean, the good news about both of them is they're going to be pretty dead reliable. So I drove the FJ Cruiser off-road for the first time yesterday.
Yeah, what'd you think of it?
Well, the ride was really good.
Yeah, better than a Wrangler, I'd say.
It's better than a Wrangler, better than a 4Runner off-road.
Yeah.
It doesn't drive as good on-road as a 4Runner, though, because of the soft ride. It's like a little bit wallowy.
Yep.
But when you get it off-road, I think it's better. It was a good experience. It's just very hard to see out of.
Especially out the back.
Yeah, but even out the front, like it's not so bad on the road. But when you're approaching like a rock, you just have no idea when you're going to hit it with the front tires.
It does have a little rear view camera built into the ours does into the rear view mirror, which is pretty cool.
Yeah,
was that useful?
Not really.
So we did a video yesterday, and we took the FJ up Webster Pass, and it's getting very late in the year here. It's of course November, and it got a little terrifying toward the top because we're on a shelf road that's snow covered, and shelf roads are terrifying enough because basically what you're doing is you're on a road that's got like 1,000 or 2,000 foot fall to one side, and when you're doing that in snow, especially drifts of snow, then the chance of you rolling off the mountain are increased exponentially, and so in a way it was very eye-opening to take the vehicle up there. In another way, it was very terrifying.
Right. I mean, it was with all that snow.
It might be our last time off-roading this year in Colorado.
At least up there, for sure.
Up in the high country. That's like
high.
We were at like 12,000 feet above sea level.
But I think the seats are pretty good in the FJ. Like
they're pretty. I'd say they're like pretty basic.
Yeah, they're pretty basic.
They're not adjustable electrically, right? They're all manual.
I thought four-wheel drive was really easy to engage. So you still have a manual lever, but it's super easy to get it into.
How about low range?
4 high and 4 low.
Yeah.
Really easy to get it in. I tried using the rear locker once, but I typically just use A-Track. And A-Track is a really cool system because it appropriates power to the wheels with traction via basically, brake lock differentials. So it squeezes down on the wheels that are spinning. And it works great. It really does work well. I would say for the vast majority of stuff you'll bring that thing through, you don't need the rear locker. As long as you have the A-Track button, you'll be good to go.
Yeah, and when we bought it, the guy who actually had it put on some really good off-road tires. Which ones are on there now? Do you remember? We go through so many.
I think they're Cooper Discoverers, the all-terrains.
Are they? Yeah. Mm-hmm. Anyway, they're certainly off-road worthy. I don't think they're snow rated because we were in the snow, but they've got big lugs and they're beefy, and they certainly have sidewall protection. So they have all the things I want on a tire when I go off-road. And it was cool to have those on there, and that's why we were able to take it off-road.
Right, yeah, it was great. The trunk is pretty big. Ours has a power outlet back there.
Yeah.
So you can put a decent amount of stuff. And the subwoofer. You can put a decent amount of stuff into the rear storage area.
And you know what my favorite thing about that one is?
What?
Now that I've lived through a world of all like iPad controls, that radio is so easy to use.
Yeah, very simple.
It's got two dials, one for volume, one for tuning. And then it's got the buttons in the bottom. If you want to preset your favorite stations, all you do is push and hold, and it saves it. How easy is that? Compare that to the i3 that we have. Oh, my God.
It really would be nice to have a full panoramic sunroof.
I don't know if that was an option.
I don't think it was ever an option.
I don't think it ever was an option.
But it would be great to have a glass roof because it's a little cave-like in there.
You're just stuck on it being like,
Well, I
think it's actually kind of cool. I kind of like that low rider. It's almost hot roddy, right? I mean, the first thing that hot rodders did was they chopped and channeled, their vehicles, right? Which meant that they took off like 2 inches from the roof so that the roof came down because that gives you that kind of really cool, like, the flat bill look. You're kind of
It's great, but hot rodders don't drive 4 hours on the freeway. I really like the FJ Cruiser, but after coming home, so we drove it about 5 hours.
That's what makes it cool.
After driving it about 6 hours yesterday, I was like, I would like to see a little bit more of what's going on outside.
Oh, I didn't think that.
It's just a little bit like, you know what it's like? It's like a Camaro, where you're just really in it, but you don't feel like you're that connected to the outside. So that's the biggest complaint I have.
I always look at a vehicle whether I could do like a road trip in it, right? And I could certainly road trip that thing. I think it'd be very comfortable on the highway. It's got a good ride. The brakes are, confidence inspiring. The steering's a little loosey goosey. It could be because ours is almost 60,000. I don't know if it came from the factory that way. But it's a comfortable car. It's comfortable. There is 2 issues that would get me a little, would keep me from giving it high marks or the top marks. You know what those are?
Fuel economy.
That's one. There's one more. Here,
Oh,
you
yeah,
can't see this. You can't see this on if you're listening to this, but if you're watching this, you can see what I'm doing.
Yeah, there's nowhere to put your arm.
Well, there is a place to put your arm. It's just completely hard plastic.
Well, yeah, your right arm's got a nice little squishy thing. Your left arm's just sitting on this really hard plastic windowsill. Or below that, you've got the little shelf for your arm, but it's also that same hard plastic. So they didn't put any padding there.
Yeah, I don't know if that was cost cutting or if that was just Toyota's way of keeping it cool.
Right.
I'm not sure. I also like the. It's got some other quirks. So let's talk about all the kind of quirks of the car. Right. We've touched upon a number of them. So we talked about the 3 little binnacles. How about the lights? How do those work? Because they work differently than most cars.
Yeah. So there's off. There's daytime running lights. There's daytime running lights on with the markers. And then there's full lights on with the markers. So I don't know why they've got that weird middle position where you have the daytime running lights on with the tail lights on. I have no idea what that is used for. Why didn't they put automatic headlights in it? That's an interesting thing.
It may have been, now they're almost ubiquitous, but back then maybe not. It also has
2014? That wasn't that long ago, Dad.
No,
that was 6 years ago.
But it was designed in 2003.
They facelifted it in what, 2010? Because they got those new tail lights and the new...
Yeah, there's a little bit... So if you want to know the difference between the newer ones and the older ones, the newer ones have red taillights versus white taillights, or is it the other way around?
So the old ones had plain red taillights.
And the new ones have white.
And the new ones have little white rings in them.
Yeah, so that's not much of a facelift.
Right. I think they changed probably the radio a little bit. Because I was looking at the 09s and 10s and they had a different head.
Yeah, it's got this also old school way of if you want to hook up Bluetooth, which you can,
right.
You got to do it through a voice command, which is weird.
Yep.
So you push the button, then it says, "How may I help you?" And you got to be like, "Connect Bluetooth."
Yeah.
Connecting Bluetooth.
It's a long process, so that's a little weird. What else is weird about it?
So if you had the TRD exhaust, the exhaust came out behind to the side, right, behind the rear wheel. And if you don't have the TRD exhaust, it comes out straight back, compromising your approach angle, which is a little weird. So, some of them have the exhaust poking backwards and some of them have it poking sideways. Which
is kind of funny. You'd think they'd all just want to poke them out the side. Do you think our exhaust is original?
Yeah, I think it's original.
I'm not super sure it is.
No, it's original. Why would you replace the exhaust?
Well, because I thought that's what one of the things James said. He looked at it, he's like, that exhaust is going to get caught up on stuff.
Yeah, but I think that's the way it was. I think the TRD came out the side. If you know, let us know in the comments below if we got that wrong.
Because we've got a big chrome tip on ours.
Yeah, but so the TRD also had a big chrome tip that said TRD.
But that one came out the side. I've no doubt the TRD. So here's another 2014, and it's got a little pipe that just kind of plops out underneath the rear bumper.
Anyway, ours has a big chromey pipe, which looks cool.
There's a 2014.
Yeah, I see it.
So I'm wondering what the deal is with the exhaust. Maybe someone just put the tip on it. Maybe it's got an aftermarket tip.
So that's also quirky about it. Of course, the 3 wipers are perhaps the most quirky thing. Now, the other quirky thing is, and once you get to see this, you'll never unsee it. It's got a really unique light signature because, Tommy?
Because of the little marker lights on the mirrors, which look like they should be spotlights.
But they're not.
No, they just kind of very dimly illuminate when you drive down the road.
But apparently you can buy, for $12, you can buy LEDs and you can put in there and make them much brighter.
But then you'll blind people with your mirror lights.
I don't think they're that blind. I mean, those things, if you look at the pattern on the outside, they're not clear. They're got little ridges and, inside of them. So I think they're never meant to be lights that light anything up. They're just marker lights.
I do like the spare tire on the back.
Yeah, it's kind of cool. It's got this weird spare tire cover.
Yep, it's got a hard shell spare tire cover. Well, it's half hard shell.
And we were looking at ours, and it had some Bridgestones, but they were all seasons. They weren't they weren't anything off-roady.
Yeah, for sure. And then you can actually, if you don't want to open up the whole rear swing gate, you can put the key in, hold it to the right, and then just pop up the glass. So you can just open up the glass.
I always forget about that.
Stuff into the...
in some vehicles, you can turn it one way and the windshield comes down, right? This one pops open. But that's something I always forget about, so I always open up the entire tailgate. The other thing you got to look out for on these is frame rust. Ours has just a little bit, but we looked at a whole bunch of them.
We talked about it at the beginning.
Yeah, there were so many that if you're buying one, there were so many that had rusty frames for some reason.
In the back, I like how everything is all rubberized and plasticized, so it's all covered in plastic and rubber.
And we have I think 400 watt outlet back there.
Yep, 400 watt outlets,
which is an option.
Yep, and I also like the floors are also covered in this rubberized material.
Oh, and there was the other thing. In the later years, we have controls on our steering wheel. The earlier ones didn't have the steering wheel controls.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, I believe so. We have audio, volume and such.
So apart from that, other weird things. I can't see out of the blind spots. That's not great.
No, what's the other weird thing is a glove box.
Yes, it's got this massive slab of plastic in front of the passenger, and then the glove box is actually this little thing that lives underneath the dash.
Yeah, so there's a little tiny glove box that's hidden, where your knees would go, and then there's this other glove box that's in front of the driver on top,
the little one.
Little cubby hole, which is weird. It kind of matches the cutout for the airbag on the passenger side, but there's like a little cubby in front of the driver where you could put stuff into.
There's also no closed center console, so what they do is they give each seat individual armrests, and then there's just a big kind of like bin in between the driver and the passenger.
Yeah, and it's okay on cup holders, so there are 2 cup holders, and I think you could put cups in the doors too.
Yep, and then you also have this big shifter, so it looks like a, I don't know, it's hard to kind of explain what it looks like, but it's this big kind of round
It's very
thing.
industrial looking. It's like almost like a pipe that somebody turned into a shifter. And some of the ones that I was looking at before we bought ours had almost that whole thing was made of billet steel. I'd love to get that actually.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it looked
like
really
an
cool.
aftermarket
It looked
thing?
exactly like the one we have, which is plastic. And by the way, that little plastic chrome top cap was an option, believe it or not.
I like the white gauges too. I think the white gauges are neat, and they illuminate white at night, so it tells you RPMs, speed, engine temperature, and voltage. So good gauges. But as far as I know, there's no Mpg gauge. So there's a trip computer,
which is weird.
but there's no way to tell you what your current
because
MPG
it's so
is.
miserable. What is the MPG? What was it officially
I
listed
think it's
at?
like 17 combined.
Yeah, it was
I
not
think it's
good.
worse.
Maybe like 1920 on the highway and like 15 in the city.
That sounds right. I think in the city you're going to do a little bit worse.
So what's the horsepower?
It's about 260 horsepower, about 271 pound-feet of torque. So,
which is plenty for that vehicle. I never felt like it doesn't. And you know what? I was driving down the highway thinking to myself, our support vehicle. And if you want to watch this video, it'll be up either on off-road or car at some point soon as we get done editing it. But our support vehicle for that was the Silverado. And that has a 10-speed automatic transmission, and when you're like going down the highway and you get to a big hill, which we have a lot of, right? You'll floor it, and it'll like go from 10 to 8 to 6, right? It'll just do. The FJ really can't do that, right? It doesn't have all those gears, so it'll go like from 5 to 3.
Right.
But it seems to be okay. It's not like it's not like it's hurting for gears, which is funny because now with these massive transmissions, you think a 5-speed would be pretty archaic.
It does okay. It's got good power.
And good sound.
It's all.
It also has this weird thing, like all of those 4-liters, when you start it up, there's a huge fan, and it sounds like you're starting up a jet engine.
Yeah.
It goes
I don't think it's direct injected, though. I think it's just like a port-injected engine.
Yeah, and I think it's also, around for a long time, so it's going to be dead reliable. The one great thing about these is, and you'll see relatively commonly on either Craigslist or Facebook or at dealers, wherever you're looking for these things, that they'll have not just 200, but there'll be ones with 300,000 on them, which is incredible for a vehicle that, was just around for 7 years starting in 2014.
Do you like the...
No, I was doing 7.
Do you like the fake hood scoop?
No, I hate the fake hood scoop, but the 4Runner has it. Toyota loves fake hood scoop, so I just think it's a Toyota thing. We talked to Mike Swears, the engineer for the Tundra and Tacoma, I think, at one point, and I went like, "Hey, dude, what's up with the fake hood scoops?" And this is his thing, so take this for what it's worth, guys. I'm not saying this is set in stone. But the reason they don't make it functional is because for Toyota, reliability is one of the cornerstones of any vehicle they build, and they have a very specific set of engine ambience that has to be maintained in the engine compartment for that engine to have that long life. And so what he was saying is, if you put a hood scoop on it, what ends up happening is that, say the parameters that you want that engine compartment to be at are from, I don't know the numbers, so I'm not going to make numbers up, but let's say you have a scale of 1 to 10, right? 1 being cold, 10 being hot, and you want that engine to be between like 4 and 6. The second you put a hood scoop on it, you could get that engine down to maybe 2 because you're allowing a lot more cold air in. And he said because of that, they don't make their hood scoops functional. I don't know if that's marketing, PR. I'll let you guys, comment on it yourselves, but that's what Toyota says.
Well, guys, let us know what you think of the FJ Cruiser in the comment section below.
Yeah, and let us know if you think it's worth as much money as people are paying for it. Part of me thinks it's a modern collectible and modern classic. So, the market reflects the demand for the thing. And part of me thinks it's in a bubble. What do you think, Tommy?
I think it's. I don't think it's in a bubble. I just think people really love them, and I understand why people really love them. They're unique. They're special. They make you feel special driving them, and it's definitely a heart over brain thing. So like the brain says, "Now I'll go buy a 4Runner." But the heart says FJ Cruiser, and I think that's what's going to keep them valuable.
So, a couple things before we wrap this up. I need an answer from you guys. And I'm of two minds on this question. Should we take ours and mod it? Because part of me thinks if it's a modern convertible, a modern classic, it's not a convertible. Wouldn't it be cool if it was?
Yeah, it'd be cool.
It would be cool, like a Jeep. Anyway, I'm not sure if we want to mod it. I asked that question in the video we did with James. That's up on TFL Off-Road if you want to actually see it and see a complete walk around of ours. And then I asked the viewers, should we mod it? And almost everybody said yes, mod it. Do a full build out. In fact, if you look at your email today, some guy sent us an email where he's going to do $60,000 worth
$60K
worth of mods to it. He's got a whole spreadsheet of everything he's going to do to it. But for me, the second you mod something is you make it your own. And then it becomes much less valuable because you just took something that everybody wants and made it into something that you want. And then the trick when you go to sell it, and keep in mind, we don't keep these forever. We, use them for video series. We think about them like movie stars in a video. Once they're done, we pass them on to you guys. Is that you're making a vehicle that you guys might want into a vehicle that I want, and then you may not want the vehicle I want.
Yeah, I think we leave it stock.
Yeah,
I really do. I think it's. I think you're going to take a lot of the.
That's why I bought that original roof rack.
Well, that's too stock.
What do you mean that's too stock?
I
that's
think you
stock,
could have done an aftermarket roof rack, but keep the suspension stock, keep the bumper stock.
What do you mean that's too stock? That's original. That's the way
Yes, but that was like the one part of them that personally, I think the original roof rack was such a dopey looking thing. It's this roundy, roly poly thing.
It's part of the design of it.
And for some reason, they only put the basket on the back half of the roof rack and not the front half.
It's
never understood.
It's like a baker creates this wonderful cake, and on top they stick, let's say a cherry, and you're like, I hate the cherry. I don't want the cherry.
Ours never had it originally. Ours didn't
right, but
it.
You could buy it with them. So to me, originality is always more sought after than.
Well, then leave it be. It's original without the roof rack.
That came with it. You could buy one with it.
Oh my goodness!
If I were a collector, then I'd want all the bits and pieces that you could get from Toyota for it, and none of the bits and pieces that you can't. The other question I have is, since they're still building them, right, and selling them. You think 25 years from now, when those are able to be imported, do you think people will import them? Or maybe not even 25 years, right? It's less than that now. Right? Because after 25 years, you can import vehicles from other countries legally.
No, I don't think people will import them.
No?
Because you can buy them here. Typically, the vehicles you see imported, for the most part, are like R34 GTI, Rs, and R32 GTRs.
Think about the market, right? Right now, one is almost worth the same as a new one if you get the 2014. So 25 years from now, they're going to be through the roof, right? And the ones from South Africa, where they're abundant and still being made, or the Middle East, right, are going to be much cheaper, and they're going to be identical to the ones that are here.
But the South African ones are right-hand drive.
Are they?
Which is a problem.
How about Middle East?
Middle East, I don't know what they're in the Middle East.
Yeah, I think they're not. I think they're left-hand.
Dad, I don't think they're classics yet.
And Japan, of course, is right-hand drive.
Right-hand drive, yeah. I don't think they're at classic status yet.
People think the trail teams are.
But I think they're collectible, but I don't think they're classics. And I think I think we've got a little bit of depreciation to go before people. 7 years old, there's very few cars in the world that appreciate at 7 years old. Like BMW 1M appreciated.
Like the exotics do. Okay, I can tell you the ones that appreciated. The Demon appreciated.
Right, but they built how many? 3,500?
3,000.
3,000.
Ford GT appreciated.
They built.
I know they're still building them. There's no number.
But I think they capped them. They're like, we're only going to build 500
they capped them, and then they said they're going to build more.
All right.
So they're still building them. What else was like that? These are very limited run numbers, right? They're not. It's not. You're not in the 220,000 range.
Right.
But once again, the sought after ones are going to be the last year of production, I think, or the last, those, right? If you're a collector and you want one, at least I'm putting myself in those shoes because that's why we bought the last year. Do you want the low mileage 2014 or do you want the high mileage 2007?
Well, as a collector, sure, but I still think that they built 13,000 or whatever it was in 2014.
And let's face it, the original FJs are very collectible now.
Yeah, but those are 60 years old.
Yeah, and actually, the FJ Cruiser can be more valuable than the original FJ. Because you can get an original FJ anywhere from, if it's pretty ratty, right, and it needs everything, like $15K, all the way up to like a pristine model is $40K. And a Trails team is going to cost you $45. So it's actually more expensive for the FJ than the original.
Although, to play devil's advocate, the ones at Mecum were selling for like $70.
Well, yeah, I'm talking about the ones, I'm not talking about the Icon ones. Those are $200K, right? I'm talking about like...
Yeah, I think that...
Like the ones you see that are, for sale.
I have no doubt that in 40 years, the FJ Cruiser is going to be very valuable. But I still think we have another 15 years of depreciation. It's just not old enough. I mean, I think 6 years old, and if Toyota brings back another one, which they are rumored to do...
There's a rumor that there might be an electric one coming.
Then I think that could either...
I wouldn't hold my breath on that.
Yeah, but if that happens, it might decrease the value of the first ones, or who knows, maybe it'll increase.
And actually, I think the fact that the 4Runner is still being made makes it even more valuable, right? Because everybody's like, hey, I can get a new 4Runner, but the one I really want is the Forbidden Fruit, which is the FJ.
Well, we'll see. Let us know what you think in the comments below.
And guys, thank you for spending another, half hour, 45 minutes with us.
Yep.
We really enjoyed these conversations. And if you're watching this on YouTube, you've got us to see. And we'd love to see your comments because we read them. And if you're listening to it as part of our podcast, thank you for, joining us this week for the FJ/4Runner special. See you guys next time.
Bye.
Ciao.